right now, let's turn our attention to something we don't hear that much from the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. That's probably a good thing. I'm not a fan. You may have picked that up over the years. But he has warned government departments they must find fresh spending and job cuts within months as he seeks to build the headroom to cut taxes, as if we're going to see genuine tax cuts that actually make us feel rich before the next election. Should we, is the question. Let's talk to Conor Holohan. He's a media campaign manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you as always for talking to us. Look, everyone is facing a hit. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. Everyone is facing a hit from inflation right now. And it is really, cutting tight for an awful lot of people, with rents going up, mortgages going up, energy bills, all of that. And their wages may be going up, what is it, average 7% in the private sector, but that doesn't touch the size of the inflation we've seen. Whitehall is also seeing those extra costs, isn't it, with their wage inflation, but also the extra cost for them, for their energy bills and all of that. Jeremy Hunt's now saying, all of you departments, you need to cut your spending. Pretty hard to cut the spending on the NHS right now with all those pledges, in education, in defence, the Home Office. Where is he going to find these cuts?
Well, it's clear that Jeremy Hunt wants to see, in some ways, staff reductions, and it really should be the incumbent on any chancellor who's handling taxpayers' money to be identifying savings that can be made and to be making them. And, there has been a civil service job boom. The TPA found back in December that in the 4 years to December, the increase in the civil service headcount was the same as the total size of the number of employees in the British Army. So that taxpayers are feeling the impact of the public sector employment boom.
Yeah, indeed. They really are to take on more people. And those figures were made very clear in the speech that the Chancellor gave only the other day, that we have seen since 2019, is it 3 or 4% increase in productivity in the private sector. Lots of people having to, straighten, narrow and really, trying to overperform to try and keep afloat over those difficult years. Whereas we've seen actually productivity fall in the public sector. And we know perfectly well why. They're all sitting at home in their PJs.
Yes, well, public service productivity is extremely sluggish, and the only way that we're going to see meaningful spending cuts in Whitehall is by reducing the headcount. And the Chancellor does need to find those savings, and he can start with cutting some of the unnecessary equality and diversity roles that we see across Whitehall. Don't
even get me started on all of that madness. That's the thing. You're not going to save the NHS budget by getting rid of those people. But the key thing is about those people is, most of them now are not making sure that, there isn't, racism in the workplace or sexism in the workplace or homophobia or whatever. And there shouldn't be in any workplace. And you do need to have HRE people doing a lot of that stuff. However, a lot of the time they're just sending people off on courses and, I'd rather my NHS surgeon or nurse was actually attending to me or a teacher was actually teaching in the classroom than being sent on another course about how to be a trans ally and all this nonsense. And so a lot of the time they're it's not that they are not producing anything themselves, they're stopping everyone else getting on with their jobs.
Quite right, Julia. And, taxpayers are feeling the impact of the civil service headcount boom. It's causing a cost of government crisis. And, Whitehall is swelling, the tax burden is swelling. We need to see both of those things trending down so that people who are struggling with the cost of living crisis can, feel the benefit.
Well, indeed. And I read this out a bit earlier, but it's worth hearing again, is when we talk about borrowing, like we've got mortgages, we've got, you mentioned Bank of England interest rate rise expected again this Thursday from 4.5% to 4.75%. But of course, this impacts not just individual homeowners, but also, of course, businesses as well, and their ability to keep afloat or having to raise prices again, feeding into inflation. It all goes on. But also, of course, the government they're affected by interest rates and they're affected by inflation too. According to the most recent data, government borrowing is running at £137 billion a year. Total debt is now higher than £2.5 trillion. And in the year to March, our national debt, effectively, our mortgage payment, our interest payments, were £106 billion. And so even a 1% rise in interest rates would add £12 billion to that, and not just in 1 year. That would carry on and then be added to later on. And that is the equivalent of 2p on the basic rate of income tax. These are huge sums. And while we're pouring out all that money in debt repayment, that's money that's not going into education or health or building roads or new hospitals or anything else.
Absolutely, Julia. And again, the public service headcount is a part of this. If we zoom out a little bit from just Whitehall, between 2018 and 2022, the size of the public sector grew by more than the total size of the workforce of our biggest supermarket, Tesco. So, unless we can get these wage bills under control, there's no way we're going to be able to pass on savings to businesses and taxpayers alike.
Yeah. I mean, now your organisation, the Taxpayers Alliance, this has always been about getting value for money for people's taxes, so we know what it's spent on and having accountability. And we often talk to Meg Hillier, who's the chair of the Public Accounts Committee in the Commons, and yes, she's a Labour MP, but it's a cross-party committee. And week after week they bring out a report about how we're just not getting good value for money. Certainly not from things like the furlough scheme and all those loans during COVID, but just generally there's just very poor, value for money from government spending. And this is the issue, isn't it? Because there just seems to be a demand now constantly for more and more spending. Oh, can't pay your energy bill, let's have a bailout. My view was we had no choice but that. And instead of the government cutting, say, VAT, the decision was to just spend more money with a bailout. Now people are having problems with their mortgages. We're told, papers, front pages, some of them saying there needs to be a bailout. We are just constantly talking about the government spending more money, as if the government has any money of its own, and it doesn't. It's our money we're being bailed out with.
I think one thing which really illustrates your point there, Julia, is yesterday we celebrated Tax Freedom Day, which is if you were to pay all of your taxes up front to HMRC, and then for the rest of the year your money would be yours. June the 19th, yesterday, was Tax Freedom Day. That's the latest Tax Freedom Day since comparable records back in 1995. So, we want to see Tax Freedom Day getting earlier. We're going to have to make cutbacks where there are some to be found. There are some to be found in the Whitehall budget, and the Chancellor is right to start looking for those savings.
And we know that the government has to do something. They have to be, there's public, infrastructure and the like. No one's saying, we want to free for all, but just the government having taken over so much of our lives now. It is extraordinary. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Conor Holohan from the Taxpayers Alliance.